Infamously, audiences often exclaim how it took them 4 complete viewings of Serial Experiments Lain to fully understand it. I call this confirmation bias. If you felt like you understood more on every rewatch, why would you have the full picture on just round 4? I was 16 when I watched it for the first time and bragged about how I totally got it on my first try. I watched it again when I was older and felt like I totally got it once again, but in a totally different way. Maybe I'll think I get it again in 10 years with a wholly new opinion of it. A completed piece of art may not change, but the context surrounding it does constantly. You can't have the experience of watching Lain on TV in Japan in 1998 unless you were there, and that doesn't mean what you get out of watching it on a low-quality YouTube stream 20 years later is somehow less valid. You may find a different meaning, but it isn't better or worse of one. My opinions have radically shifted on art pieces over time as often as they haven't. I used to think Miyazaki films were overrated and boring. Now I spend nearly 2 hours analyzing each of them with my friends on GhibliCast, and that's from my perspective as a 27-year-old watching most of them for just the second time. How will I perceive these films when I am the age that Miyazaki was when he wrote them? How does he perceive them now that he's much older? Before I started a YouTube channel, I wanted to be a fiction author. Recently, I've been reading back through the countless character profiles and opening chapters which I made back then and analyzing them, finding they say so much more about myself than I had realized at the time that I feel like I know my own intentions better now than I had when I wrote them. Maybe that's confirmation bias too. My 20-year-old self isn't around anymore to defend his decisions. When I first got into anime, I didn't have the option of finishing shows. All of my consumption came in 2 forms, either what was aired on Cartoon Network or whatever my older cousin bought on DVD with his $30 a week allowance. While I was able to finish shows like Cowboy Bebop, Fooly Cooly, and Trigun several times over on Adult Swim, Yu Yu Hakusho would replay the same 26 episodes over and over again until the next arc was dubbed, and then it switched time slots for the Chapter Black arc so that I couldn't catch it on TV anymore, and the final arc never even aired. I started the show in 2001 and completed it in 2015. Rurouni Kenshin also moved to the Toonami block, which aired slightly before my bus reached the house when I was in middle school, so I fell catastrophically behind on what had once been my favorite anime during its most famous arc, and had to learn what happened through fan forums. Because my cousin would research new shows to watch constantly online, and buying a complete series might have taken 6 to 8 weeks at the rate he could purchase new volumes, we would rarely make it past the second disc of anything. And once I started my own collection, I developed the same habit, because there were just so many cool sounding shows coming out. Like most newer anime fans just getting into the habit of marathoning and viewing the medium as this endless sea of stuff that sounds good which aficionados insist they must consume, I was highly averse to rewatching anything. That is, until I watched Fooly Cooly until I knew what was actually going on, and concluded that until I'd seen something twice, I hadn't even really seen it. Now that I've plowed my way through a significant chunk of anime history, I realize it's not even impossible to watch all of it in the span of 15 years or so. I've been taking my sweet time so I can actually enjoy the process. It cracks me up when people criticize me for talking about shows which I haven't finished. I wonder, have you finished it? It's amazing how often I'll complete a show and then scour the internet to see if anyone's already said what I was thinking about it, and find that in spite of hundreds of reviews all over the net, no one has picked up on what I did. Sometimes I read a review that seems to have gotten so much out of something that did nothing for me at all, I wonder if I didn't watch the right show. When my friend Ghost Lightning told me about how he religiously returned to the last episode of Gurren Lagann again and again, and then his co-blogger friend Mecha Fetish wrote about his love of rewatching favorites countless times, I was inspired. It's amazing how much more worth I can get from watching the same Ghibli movie 4 times in the same week than I get from watching an equivalent amount of any TV anime. I can't even finish an episode of Evangelion without picking up on something I missed before, which is why people still watch that shit today. But these shows aren't unique, they just appeal to me. I don't always give every episode of every show my full attention, or watch them under the right circumstances or in the right mood, or in the highest quality. I couldn't. I watched thousands upon thousands of episodes of anime. Sometimes I hate a show because I watched it the same week I broke up with a girl who was obsessed with horses, and I don't want to be reminded of all the bullshit horse movies I sat through for her sake. Sometimes I have an easier time watching something I thought I'd hate because I was just marathoning something I hated even more. Sometimes I pick up on more because I'm drunk or stoned, and sometimes I pick up on less for the same reasons. Sometimes I just start screaming in the middle of an episode. At other points, I've seen the same show enough times that I can recite it. 5 years later, it feels passé to me. Another 5 years later, I'm excited by the challenge to see if my growth as a writer in the last 10 years has afforded me the ability to rephrase my feelings with more clarity. It's not always that my perception of the show has changed, but that my worldliness has grown so much that I can give words to concepts I only barely grasped before. When asked if I might pick up this or that show again, I used to always say that nothing is ever truly dropped forever, often citing an anecdote about how I dropped Standalone Complex and called it ugly after 8 episodes in 2008, and then watched it all and gave it a 10 out of 10 in 2014. I stand by the idea that I don't think of anything as dropped forever, nor do I think of having seen an entire show as having finished it. My interactions with any show will go on for as long as I live, but inevitably we're all going to have to drop everything alongside the other shoe. How many times have you rewatched my videos? According to my bank account, not enough. Click on my playlist to listen to literally a month and a half of my voice and support me on Patreon so I don't have to shut up. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow.